Ever hear a house that's been silent for a year suddenly come alive and realize the help you barely noticed is the only thing holding your family together? Stay with me, because one unannounced arrival, one burst of laughter, and one billionaire's pride are about to collide in a way nobody in that mansion saw coming. William Foster hadn't planned to come home early. He never did anymore. But that afternoon in Connecticut, his car turned into the long, circular drive of his $15 million estate without a call ahead, without security briefing him, without even Nancy the housekeeper knowing. He stepped out into air that smelled like manicured hedges and money, walked to the front door, slid the key in like he'd done 1,000 times, and paused with his hand still on the lock. For the past 18 months, this place hadn't sounded like a home. It had sounded like a museum after hours perfect, expensive, and dead. Since Catherine's accident on the FDR Drive, his triplet daughters, Emma, Lily, and Sophie, had become quiet in a way that scared every specialist he hired. They were 4 years old when they lost their mother, and after that, they simply stopped. Not tantrums, not acting out, not even the usual grief in child-sized bursts. They shut down. They stopped talking, stopped playing, stopped smiling. 3 identical little faces with eyes that looked straight through people like they were glass. William had tried everything. The best pediatric neurologist trauma therapist, speech specialists, sensory programs, anything money could purchase, he purchased. His empire was built on solving problems. Manhattan towers, Brooklyn developments, international deals. He lived by leverage and outcomes. But grief didn't care about his spreadsheets. Every solution failed. And when men like William can't fix something, they often do the only thing they know. They work harder, travel more, and pretend distance is a strategy. He turned pain into a schedule. Red-eye flights, 16-hour meetings, anything to keep him out of that house, because going home meant facing 3 tiny lives frozen in place and the echo of Catherine's absence in every hallway. That was why the sound he heard the moment he opened the door made his body lock up. Laughter. Not the polite laugh of adults at a fundraiser child laughter. Light, real, messy, bouncing off marble and wood like it belonged there. Then singing. A little chorus. William's heart started hammering so hard it felt like his ribs were too small. It couldn't be. It had been a year and a half since he heard his daughter's voices. He didn't move at first, just stood in the entryway, like he was afraid that if he breathed too hard, the sound would disappear. Then he followed it, walking quickly through rooms that were always spotless, always staged, always quiet. The singing pulled him toward the kitchen. As he reached the doorway, he felt a strange mix of hope and dread, because hope after grief can feel like stepping onto a floor you're not sure will hold. He pushed the door open, and for a moment, the world stopped. On the kitchen floor sat Diana Washington, the new hire Nancy had insisted they bring in 28, from the Bronx, an education student trying to pay tuition, a woman William had barely registered beyond extra staff. She was sitting cross-legged, sleeves pushed up, hair slightly undone, surrounded by William's triplets like she was the sun, and they were planets that had finally remembered how to orbit. Emma was combing Diana's hair with a plastic brush, carefully, seriously, like a tiny stylist with a mission. Lily had paper taped to the cabinet door and was drawing boldly, markers scattered like confetti. And Sophie, his Sophie, the one who used to crawl into Catherine's lap with a book, was singing. Actually singing, not humming. Words, melody. And all 3 girls wore colorful little aprons over their clothes, matching Diana's, as if they'd formed their own little team. I'm smiling wide. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. And the girls sang with her, 3 clear voices weaving together like they'd never stopped. For 3 seconds, William felt pure joy so sharp it nearly knocked him off balance. His daughters were back, not fully, not healed, but alive, awake in a way he'd been begging the universe for. Then something else surged up through that joy. Heat, possession, control, pride. The kind of instinct that makes certain people see anything they didn't orchestrate as a threat. What the hell is going on here? The sound cut the room like a slammed door. The singing died instantly. The girls flinched like flowers closing in sudden cold. Diana rose quickly, fear flashing across her face. Not because she'd done something wrong, but because she understood power when she heard it. Mr. Foster, I can explain, she started. William's voice came out hard, too loud for the space. You were hired to clean, not to play house. He gestured at the paper on the cabinets, the markers, the little smudges of color on tile that was normally pristine. Look at this mess. Paint on the floor. And you have my daughters on the ground like... He stopped because the next words that jumped into his mind weren't about safety or cleanliness. They were about class, about race, about where he assumed Diana came from. Even in his anger, he caught himself, but the damage was already in the air. Diana's eyes lifted, steadying. Her voice stayed low, controlled, not pleading. Like what, sir? That question hit him because it forced him to hear himself. He didn't answer it. Instead, he made a decision the way he made every decision in business. Fast, final, and with the confidence of someone who rarely faces consequences. You're fired, he snapped. Get your things and get out of my house. Now. Diana's face tightened, but she didn't crumble. She looked down at the three girls, who were watching her with wide, wet eyes like they understood that something precious was being taken away again. Diana knelt, kissed each little forehead, and whispered something only they could hear. Then she stood and walked toward the hall with her head up, not rushing, not begging. The girls followed her, tiny feet pattering, and William watched them trail behind her like they were being pulled by gravity. At the door, they waved at Diana silently, and when they turned back toward their father, William expected fear, maybe anger, maybe blankness. What he saw instead chilled him.
Disappointment.
Not the confused sadness of children. Disappointment, like they had finally reached for him and he'd pushed them away. Then without a word, the triplets held hands and went upstairs together, back toward the quiet he'd lived in for 18 months. The house went silent again, and it wasn't peaceful. It was a punishment. For the first time since Catherine's death, William felt a different kind of fear, that he'd just destroyed the only bridge back to his daughters because his ego couldn't stand not being the architect of their recovery. 3 days passed, and the mansion returned to its old state quiet like a tomb. Nancy brought breakfast trays upstairs because the girls wouldn't come down. They sat together on their bed holding hands, staring at the window like the world was happening somewhere else. Nancy tried to speak carefully when she told William, "They asked about Diana last night. Just once." William didn't look up from his laptop. "And what did you say?" "That she left." William's jaw tightened. "Good. Maybe they'll learn they can't get attached to just anyone." The words sounded colder than he intended, but he didn't take them back. He tried to focus on work, but the house kept showing him ghosts. Every time he walked past the kitchen, he imagined the tape marks where the drawings had been. The echoes of singing, the way Sophie's voice sounded when it wasn't trapped behind grief. On the second day, he found the hallway, shoulders shaking, trying not to cry loudly. He knelt. "What's wrong, princess?" Sophie looked up. Huge green eyes, Catherine's eyes. And then for the first time in 18 months, Sophie spoke directly to him. Clear as day. "Why were you mean to Diana?" The question hit William like a punch to the chest. "I wasn't mean," he said quickly, defensively. She wasn't doing her job properly." Sophie's lip trembled. "She loved us," she whispered. Then she turned and went upstairs, leaving William kneeling alone with the sick realization that his daughter's first words in a year and a half weren't "daddy." They were a judgment. Meanwhile, Diana was dealing with the kind of fallout rich people can create with a sentence. Fired without warning, without a chance to explain, and then quietly blacklisted. Domestic agencies wouldn't take her calls. She'd hear polite voices, then silence, then, "We're not hiring." Eventually, someone slipped and told her the description attached to her name. Inappropriate behavior with minors. Not a criminal charge, but a professional death sentence in childcare work. Diana went from a stable paycheck to nothing overnight. And at home in the Bronx, waiting for her, was reality with no sympathy rent due, food costs, and her 15-year-old nephew Tyrone, the boy she'd been raising alone since her sister died of cancer 2 years earlier. Tyrone was bright, disciplined, the kind of kid who stayed after class to ask questions. He dreamed about studying engineering one day. Systems, structures, building something better than what he'd grown up around. One night he found Diana at the kitchen table surrounded by bills, her face still, eyes calculating. "Auntie, you okay?" he asked softly. Diana forced a smile. "I'm fine, baby, just sorting things out." Tyrone studied her, then said what he already knew. "It's that rich man, right? The one who fired you." Diana didn't answer, but her hands clenched. Tyrone had never seen fought for his mother. She'd fought for him, and now with her jaw set like that, Tyrone recognized the look. Not broken. Planning. What William didn't know What he never could have imagined, because he'd never learned to see people like Diana as dangerous, was that Diana hadn't left that mansion empty-handed. While gathering her things, she'd noticed documents on William's office desk contracts, account numbers, property transfers. The kind of paperwork powerful men leave lying around because they assume the people cleaning their floors don't read. Diana did read. She didn't fully understand it in the moment, but she understood enough to know the numbers didn't feel clean. So she snapped photos. Quietly, quickly. Not for revenge at first, more like instinct. Like a person who's lived long enough around scarcity knows when something smells off. 3 weeks later, she finally found work. A night cleaning job in an accounting office in Manhattan. It wasn't what she wanted, but it paid. More importantly, it put her in a building with computers and internet access during hours when she was alone. And alone in that quiet office, Diana did what people underestimate the most. She learned fast. She cross-checked the contracts she photographed with public records. She traced property IDs. She mapped transfers. She printed anything that looked suspicious. And slowly a pattern emerged. Ghost properties, shell companies, transfers to offshore accounts that didn't match taxable income. William Foster's empire, all those towers and glossy brochures, looked suddenly like a structure built on rotten beams. Diana worked like a machine with purpose. Days were for resumes, Tyrone, surviving. Nights were for cleaning offices and gathering information. Weekends were for the public library, where she used free computers to build a clean chain of evidence. She wasn't an accountant, but she didn't need to be to see when a system is lying. And then on a cold October night when at her table, her phone rang. Diana Washington? This is Amanda Silva, Department of Justice. We'd like to speak with you about irregularities we've noticed in the Foster family's business. We understand you worked in their home. Diana's grip tightened. How did you get my number? An anonymous source suggested you might have relevant information about tax evasion and money laundering. We've been building a case, but we need inside access. Diana looked at her stack of documents. The sleepless weeks, the careful notes. She didn't hesitate. When do you want to meet? The next day in a discreet cafe in Manhattan, Diana arrived early and chose a back table with clear sightlines, because some habits stick. Amanda Silva, a prosecutor in her 40s with sharp eyes and a calm voice, sat down and opened a briefcase. Before we begin, you need to understand how serious this is, Amanda said. We're tracking a scheme that could involve hundreds of millions. Diana slid her own folder forward, plain, cheap plastic, but packed with precision. I understand, she said, and I have what you need. For 2 hours, Diana walked her through everything: documents, inconsistencies, timelines, transfers. Amanda asked tight technical questions. Diana answered carefully, not guessing, not exaggerating. When Amanda asked how she got access, Diana didn't dramatize it. He leaves things out. He talks on speakerphone. He assumed no one around him mattered. Amanda closed the folder, impressed, and warned her. William Foster has powerful lawyers, influence. This won't be easy. Diana smiled, small but unshakable. I grew up in the Bronx. I'm raising a teenager alone. I work nights and study days. If you think I'm scared of a rich man with attorneys, you don't know me. While Diana built the case with federal investigators, William kept living like a man protected by his own mythology. He treated Diana like a deleted file gone, irrelevant. But at home, his Siderber, son and his daughters were failing again. Nannies came and went. The triplets didn't respond. Nancy reported, they just sit together holding hands and stare out the window. William snapped, they'll get over it. He didn't understand that children don't get over being shown that love is temporary and adults are unsafe. At the same time, agents were analyzing Diana's evidence in a federal room filled with screens. Foster Holdings lists 47 Manhattan properties. One agent explained. 31 show major discrepancies. Some don't exist on record but generate undeclared income. Amanda turned pages. We also have Zurich meetings, offshore transfers, and most damaging recorded calls where Foster discusses evasion tactics. Diana had recorded some of William's speakerphone conversations when he talked openly about illegal moves in areas where she was working, because he did it like she wasn't there. Do you realize this could mean 15 to 20 years? And asset forfeiture? Diana's expression didn't change. She asked one question, the only one that mattered to her. What happens to the girls? Amanda sighed. If their father is arrested and no family steps in, they go into the system unless someone qualified comes forward. Diana nodded slowly. Then I'll be that someone. 2 weeks later, while William sat in his home office watching Asian markets and sipping black coffee, the first sign of collapse rolled into his driveway. Black federal vehicles, quiet and heavy. Then came the pounding on the front door. "William Foster, FBI, we have a warrant." His brain tried to reject it. He wasn't a man used to being surprised. But the door opened and his world turned to chaos, agents in his home, boxes for evidence, cameras outside filming live, an arrest announcement that didn't care about his reputation. "You are under arrest for tax evasion, money laundering, and bank fraud," an agent said as handcuffs clicked around wrists that had signed 1,000 deals. William shouted about connection. Holding a thick file, "We have documentation of a laundering scheme involving 47 properties and recorded conversations where you describe hiding income." William went pale. Recorded conversations. And then he saw Diana standing in the doorway in a dark blazer, calm as steel, not the woman he'd barked at in an apron, but someone with quiet authority. His voice cracked. "You?" Diana looked at him steadily. "No, Mr. Foster, I didn't work for the FBI. I worked in your home. You fired me for making your daughter smile. And in the process, you reminded me exactly what kind of man you are." William tried to argue privacy, illegality, anything. Diana spoke evenly. "You employed me in your home. You left documents exposed. You chose to discuss crimes out loud. You didn't think I counted. That was the moment it landed. He hadn't been taken down by a rival developer. My daughters, what happens to my daughters?" Diana stepped closer and her voice softened, not forgiving him, but centering what mattered. "Emma, Lily, and Sophie will be safe. CPS approved my temporary guardianship. They won't enter the system." William stared like he couldn't compute it. "You planned this," Diana corrected him gently. "I prepared to protect them when you couldn't." Through the rear window of the federal car, William saw the front lawn blur by, and then the girls appeared, running toward Diana as soon as they recognized her. They threw themselves into her arms, talking all at once, voices overlapping, alive. William could hear them faintly even through glass, and something inside him collapsed that had nothing to do with money. In that moment, he understood he'd lost far more than an empire. He'd lost the only thing that ever mattered, and he'd handed it to the woman he couldn't see. 18 months later, Diana sat in the garden of a modest home filled with noise and warmth, sunflowers swaying in memory of Catherine. The triplets, now 6, laughed, argued, read out loud, and called her Aunt Diana because love had finally become consistent again. William served a long federal sentence. His building seized, his name reduced to a cautionary headline. The girls visited him monthly, not because they owed him, but because Diana taught them that forgiveness is a choice, not a denial. One evening, watching them do homework at the same kitchen table where she now made sure they were seen every day, Diana thought about how the story really ended. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't humiliation. The real victory was 3 children learning to live again. Some people build towers, she thought, but others build a home. And when the sun set over a house full of laughter, it became obvious which one lasts. If this story hits you, share it with someone who believes love can rebuild what grief breaks, and subscribe for more stories where the invisible do the impossible without ever needing permission.